So in my situation, as I was growing up, I would always see the women in the kitchen cooking the most amazing, delicious food,
Right.
but in the kitchen, cleaning, washing something, but never sitting reading a book or
engaging in intelligent conversation.
right. And for the first time ever, we had an event, we had a party at our home, and this woman was invited. She's, at that time, she was my uncle's manager, which is such a big deal.
Yeah.
And he invited her, and she came to our home, and she was speaking with so much confidence with all of these men, talking about politics and the economy and things that sounded so intelligent that I've never seen a woman represent that image. And I was just so fascinated. Like, I was just staring at her the entire time. And, even though maybe that party was a couple of hours, I still have the image now, like decades later.
We would like to thank our title sponsor, B1 Bank. B1 Bank knows that entrepreneurs like you are always thinking one step ahead. So you need banking solutions that can keep up. It begins with lending. Does your business need working capital or financing for new equipment? How about a real estate or a construction loan? Good news, the B1 lending team is ready to learn your goals and help you find the best lending option available. Now let's talk about uncomplicating your daily cash flow. B1 offers a full array of treasury management services that let you collect funds faster, pay funds more efficiently, and access your information with powerful online tools. Most importantly, B1 understands the value of working with local nonprofits to build a stronger community. They believe in giving back through hands-on involvement with their B1 Community Outreach Program because it's simply the right thing to do. B1 Bank. Be uncomplicated. To learn more, visit b1bank.com. Equal housing lender, member FDIC. Hello, I'm Andrew McClendon, your host of the Next Entrepreneur Podcast. We're here today in the Propel Production Podcast Studio in Baton Rouge, and we welcome our guest, Dima Ghawi. Dima, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Andrew.
So you're the author of the book, Breaking Vases, a memoir of your life. But you're also an entrepreneur. Tell us what you do.
So for the last 8 years, I've been focused on creating healthy work cultures for companies. I do that through executive coaching, through training, and I love being on the stage and giving keynotes.
Oh, that's fantastic. So let's talk about your life story, which is the subject of your book. And the subtitle, Breaking Vases, the subtitle is Shattering Limitations and Daring to Thrive, a Middle Eastern Woman's Story. And Dima, I love this book. Now, I was mentioning to you before we started, probably not a book that as a man, I would walk into the bookstore and pick up, a story about a Middle Eastern woman's. I'd pick up a book, about a business tycoon or a sports story or, an adventure, pretty fairly limited reading. I just devoured this book. It's beautiful. It's beautifully written. It's an amazing story of triumph. It's very engaging and suspenseful. And you overcame oppression and cultural challenges with all of its brutal realities. It's a story that has the power to inspire others to overcome whatever challenges they may face, but particularly women, right? So congrats on a beautifully written. I am so glad that I read that, and I'm encouraging my wife and others to read it as well.
Thank you.
So let's start. You grew up in Amman, Jordan, right?
Yeah.
I found it interesting that your family was conservative Catholic, and that's a very small slice of the population, like less than 2% of the population.
Now, at that time, it was 5, so it's getting smaller.
I see. And so, but particularly when your story unfolds and you see the things that transpired in your life and your family, there was a real disconnect for me from what I think of as a conservative Christian to some of the things that you had to deal with in the way of an impressive environment. Mm. Beautiful stories there. And you start with a story about your grandmother, Tata.
Yeah.
And she had a vision for you about being formally educated. Mm. Tell us about Tata.
I grew up mainly at my grandmother's home. And I fell in love with her cooking, with the smell of the fresh pastries every day. She was fun, she was playful, and she had a vision for me to be the first formally educated woman. In her situation, she was not allowed to go to school. She couldn't even go to first grade, maybe even not even kindergarten. As a woman, since she was young, she was supposed to stay home and learn how to cook and clean to prepare her for her purpose in life, which is she ended up doing that all of her life. But even with my mother was not allowed to go to college. So she did finish high school, but she wanted to have a degree in history, but she was not allowed to.
Yeah.
She got married after high school as well.
So when you define formal education, you're talking the equivalent of college.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so Tata had this game, the graduation game.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
So I was young. I remember I was 5 years old. And one day she called me to the kitchen where she was cooking. And she said, "We are going to play a new game today," because she always had fun games. And she said, "We're going to play, imagine the day you're going to graduate from college." And she got one of her magazines. She loved to read about all the movie stars. And she rolled it up, tied it with a red ribbon, and she said, "I'm going to hand this to you. When I do, be so excited." So, of course, I didn't understand what all of that meant. And I saw her standing in her kitchen as if she had thousands of people watching us in her kitchen. And she said, "Help me to congratulate the next graduate, Dima Ghawi." And she would show me to come to her. And I did. And she would hand me the diploma and she would be crying with excitement. And I didn't understand what all of that meant. I just thought it's so much fun to play with my grandmother.
Yeah. It was beautiful, but the seeds that it planted, and it's that amazing power of suggestion that reads through your whole book.
Yeah.
That started there. That's just like, it's so fantastic. I love that.
Yeah, and even when I went through the most difficult time of so much limitations for me to stop education, that image of me being barefoot, running in my grandmother's kitchen and playing with her, that just kept me going.
Dima, there's some beautiful writing in your book that's filled with it, and I've clipped several passages through there that are very defining and very beautifully written. And at this point, you write about that time in your life, against many odds, but also with some nourishment. The seed grew, the seed that Tata planted for you. It took root in my heart, bloomed in my imagination, and eventually it brought the fruits of success into my life. It's just beautiful. And particularly, that's exactly what happened. And then you tell the story of losing your grandmother.
Yeah.
And the impact on that throughout your life. But she seemed to be a beautiful force.
Yeah, she absolutely changed my life. But she also gave me two contradicting messages early on, which is the power of education and changing the norm and creating a better life and self-awareness and all the power that comes with that. But also she gave me not so good message, which is don't make mistakes, follow, obey, keep worry about the expectations of others and all of this. So it was, to me, my life is about the contradiction between the two.
Yeah. So she taught you about the breaking vases or breaking vases.
Yeah.
Tell us what that meant to you.
So we were in her kitchen playing again, and I was around 5 years old as well, and she was arranging flowers in a glass vase. I saw her, she held it, but that day she wasn't as happy and playful as usual. So she held it up and she was very serious, and she told me that, do you see this perfect glass vase? A girl is just like it. And then she said, if it gets cracked for any reason, you can never fix it. You can never glue it back. We're just going to throw it in the trash. So I can't believe it. I was 5 years old where these messages were ingrained early on. Of course, at that time, I didn't understand what she was saying.
Right.
But when I think about it, my grandmother was preparing me early on about the expectations I'm going to face as a woman, and how I should always worry about how I am being perceived by the community, and how I should just follow and obey, and how my life is going to be predetermined for me, and I just have to live that life. Happy or not happy, depressed, doesn't matter. That's the life I'm going to live, and that's it.
Yeah, and the cracks in the vase could be, reputational situations, but the message, which is consistent throughout, is the reflection that has on the family, right? Mm-hmm. And it's just devastating to consider the pressure that's put on young women in your culture to live this seemingly perfect life and do what they're told. Throughout the book, you talk about numerous brutal realities, right? You talked about, you heard a story years later, but on the day you were born, your paternal grandfather, after learning of your birth, his first words were just devastating. Tell us about that.
So when my grandfather heard that I was born, his first thing that he said was that he wishes that I die, because he wanted the first grandchild to be a boy, not a girl. But to me, that's not the saddest part. The saddest part, I discussed this with my mom years later, because she's the one who told me this. And she said, "Oh, Dima, this is so common. Why are you even upset? So many people say that." So it's just the justification about these things that make no sense. And it becomes the norm, right? You should not be upset, and you're not the only one. So just be okay with it.
Yeah, I'm the father of 3 daughters and 5 grandchildren, but 2 granddaughters, and this, you write very beautifully that subjecting women to fear, injustice, and inequality as a means to maintain the rule of order for honoring men was a normalized way of thinking. It was an indisputable fact of life. And you talk about movies that you would grow up watching, and you in the presence of your father. And tell me this term that you use in the book, Beit Atata.
Beit Ata'a.
Beit Ata'a. Tell us what that means.
So this is a concept that is so horrifying. So let's say a woman is in a abusive relationship and she escapes. The man can go to the police and say, "My wife left," and the police would go and drag her back to him, and she has to live with him. So she doesn't get cultural support, family support. And for some reason in these movies, they had that a lot, but they would say that it's part of the Islamic religion, which is not, which is interesting. I learned as I grew up that has nothing to do with religion. It is just culturally, we've been programmed that this is part of religion. So a lot of people thought that this is what God wants. But that's not what God wants.
No.
But when you see it over and over by the media being covered like a lot, first it becomes again the norm. It becomes in a way expectation, and a lot of people assume that they're doing the right thing because that's what God wants.
Yeah, you talked about in these movies where a woman would be the victim, right, and had disrespected the family in some way, and then something tragic would happen to the woman, maybe be killed, right? But you would listen to your father's reaction to this, like supporting that. She deserves that.
Yeah.
Which, how do you process that as a little kid? I mean, that's a very damaging message there, right? But that's the environment you grew up in.
Again, everything we're talking about, it's normalized early on, especially when you see somebody in a powerful role like my father saying these things. It's easy for a little child to believe that.
Right.
But it also creates a sense of fear early on, where if you only dare do something similar, that's going to be very acceptable for me, that the same thing would happen to me, which eventually it did.
Right. You talk about examples that showed up in your life of who you wanted to be. And you talked about a lady that you saw at a party. Her name was Amal. And tell us that story, because it's really fascinating, because you didn't have a connection with her at all, right?
Yeah, she's a total stranger. I just saw her once. And this story, I'll share it in a second, it just shows the power of role models and representation. Mm-hmm. So in my situation, as I was growing up, I would always see the women in the kitchen cooking the most amazing, delicious food,
right.
But in the kitchen, cleaning, washing something, but never sitting, reading a book or
engaging in intelligent conversation.
Right. And for the first time ever, we had an event, we had a party at our home, and this woman was invited. She's, at that time, she was my uncle's manager, which is such a big deal.
Yeah.
And he invited her, and she came to our home, and she was speaking with so much confidence with all of these men talking about politics and the economy and things that sounded so intelligent that I've never seen a woman represent that image. And I was just so fascinated. Like, I was just staring at her the entire time. And, even though maybe that party was a couple of hours, I still have the image now, like decades later. Because it's such a big deal.
So that was someone that you saw and you're like, you identified, that's what I want to be.
Yeah. Educated, smart, intelligent, independent, all of these things that were not part of the plan when I first grew up. Like, as I was born, the plan for my life by my family and the community was something else.
Yeah. Now, you did get support to get your education, but to see if I'm right on my timeline here. Did you get your first degree after you were married?
So yeah, that was the condition for my marriage, that I wanted to have my bachelor's. And thank goodness my husband agreed. So I did. I graduated as we were married, and I became the first educated woman. And then afterwards, after things fell apart, I focused on the education again and got my master's.
Yeah, I remember you writing about that. Your family supported you getting the diploma, but not for what you would do with it, but
right.
for what it would do to make you more attractive for some suitor to come in and claim you, for lack of a better word. And it would be a positive reflection on the family in the community.
Yeah.
It never seemed to be about what you would do with that degree.
Yeah, and I don't think I was supposed to do anything with that degree. It was, in a way, a marketing tool, like you were just saying. And in case the world fell apart and my husband passes away and nobody can support me financially, in case all of these horrible things happen, then I'll have one thing that I can use.
That's fascinating. So there are a couple of heroes in your story. We've talked about one, your grandmother, and your Uncle Anton, which would have been your mother's brother.
Yeah.
Seemed to have like the most beautiful guidance for you, and which contrasted so much from what you were hearing in other parts of your life. Tell us about Anton.
So I absolutely love my uncle. I would not be talking to you right now if my uncle did not support me. He was the only one in the entire family that was supporting my decisions. And he was the one from the beginning, in addition to my grandmother, talking about the value of education. He's like, you need to break the cycle of abuse. You need to get educated. Don't be like all of these other women. And so my uncle, when I always wonder why he was and still so supportive to everything that I do. So he's a middle child, and he was very introvert. He wasn't very talkative, great in reading. He loved meditation, and he was considered a misfit, considered that he didn't belong, and as a result, he was not treated well. He wasn't treated well as a child. So as he grew up, he wanted to make sure that he's helping others because of the challenges he had as he was a child.
And then he was educated in the U.S.?
Yeah, he finished all of his education. He has PhD in economics. Very smart man. Yeah. And he taught at universities. So, but I imagine how tough for him to have a PhD in economics and be connected with all of these intelligent people, but also be connected with his past and also his family in Jordan, how they were still doing things the old way.
He spoke to you as an adult when you were young.
Yeah.
Which is great. You talk about him. You had another beautiful passage here. You said, Tata planted the seed for graduation. The stranger at the party, Amal, showed me it was possible. Another woman example. But Uncle Anton watered that seed that Tata had planted. He nurtured the dream of a path for education that was not limited to just one degree or to marriage or family. Even though I was flattered and even encouraged by my uncle's belief in me, that dream stayed dormant at first. So, I mean, you can see that had it been just one of those three things that you mentioned there, maybe that wouldn't have taken root. But when those three things in your life added up and with that nurturing from Uncle Anton, that's what led to great things. So
yeah, well, that's why I dedicated the book to him.
Yeah, it's beautiful. This podcast is sponsored by NAI Latter and Blum, Louisiana's leading commercial real estate firm, offering expertise in every discipline, including office, industrial, retail, multifamily, and corporate services. Their agents guide you through the real estate process from start to finish, using a host of marketing, prospecting, and analytical technologies. As leading entrepreneurs, your valuable time and resources should align with the most trusted name in commercial real estate, NAI Latter and Blum. Learn how they can work for you at www.latterblum.com. Turnkey Solutions is a nationwide cybersecurity and IT systems expert, providing the services that growing businesses need to stay ahead of hackers, hurricanes, and IT nightmares. With 24/7 support teams and offices across Louisiana and Texas, they bring peace of mind to companies of all sizes. Their 5-star rated team provides lightning-fast IT support with the cybersecurity and business continuity solutions today's businesses demand. When you're looking for a technology partner to provide you with peace of mind, find out more by calling them at 225-224-6594 or chat with them online at www.tks.la/NXT. I love learning about different parts of the culture. The tea or coffee ground readings that M. Simone would do. That was your grandmother's friend?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so they would, how did that work? You would drink the coffee, and then you'd swirl the grounds?
Yes. And then you'd
turn it upside down.
Yes.
And it would dry.
Yes.
And then M. Simone would then read it like she was reading your fortune.
Yes.
Right?
So she's like a psychic. Yeah.
Yeah. That's fascinating. I just didn't know about that. And so, or was that your mother that did that?
So my mom initially, and my mom depended a lot on that for her well-being, like mental health.
Yeah.
Because Simone would tell her, things will be okay. And I think my mom needed to hear that.
Yeah. She was going to figure out, like, where is this going? Dealing with his anger issues.
Yeah. But to me, the few stories I shared in the book about Simone, she was like so right.
Really?
It's so scary.
Yeah.
Like, it's amazing. And the funny thing, one of my friends here, she's originally from Syria, and she reads the coffee grinds too. So I, once in a while, go have coffee at her home.
That's fascinating. You told the story how that it applied to you when you had your coffee grounds read, and M. Simone, talked about there being a suitor in your life soon, or it's a great story, which led into this. Just in a few months, someone comes calling, right? Tell us that story. How you met your future husband.
Yeah, so one time I went with my mom to see M. Simone, and I was above 18, so I was older than 18, and I was allowed to have my coffee read too, my cup. And she looked at it, and then she started saying, wow, I see a tall woman is coming to visit you, and there's going to be an engagement. And of course, my mom and I, we did not understand what she was talking about. So then a few months ago, we got a call, or my parents got a call from a cousin. He's 9th cousin. We have the same last name. And him and his wife said that they wanted to come and visit us. So his wife is a tall woman. And they were arranging for me to meet their husband. And they said, we need to make sure that the cousins meet each other. And my parents automatically knew that was going to be somehow an introduction that would lead, because they do these things a lot.
Right.
I was definitely not ready. I was just 19.
Right.
But to them, they were just so excited.
You wrote about Malik, was that your husband? And so he was 10 years older than you.
Yeah.
Right. So he's 29, you're 19. And you talked about your parents' response to this visit, and how happy you said. I remember my father smiling ear to ear. You said, and if the most eligible man in our community chose me at 19, it would reflect well on my parents by indicating that they had raised me right.
Yes.
To be the kind of girl to satisfy the demanding Middle Eastern man's high expectations. So again, this thing about how something that you do in your life would impact the community. How would it look from the outside? Not so much anything else, apparently.
Yeah, it's not about the individual. It's about the community. It's about the family, everything we do.
Yeah.
And
the optics and the appearance, it would reflect well on them. But it turned out that the way, and it's fascinating to learn how all this worked, right? So like the next day, Malik's father calls your father and says,
yeah, we're interested.
We're interested. We're going to do a deal here.
Yeah.
And Malik's going to marry your daughter, right?
Yeah. And it's funny because...
But not a process of dating. Or,
no.
You just saw him you just met him the next day is the marriage proposal.
Yeah. And then a few weeks later, we had the official, where we had all family come, and they did the official proposal. Yeah. And I think about 2 months later, we had the engagement. So it's like things happen so fast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so a lot of stories there. Your book is filled with beautiful stories. And so many things we could talk about. But, there's one that stuck out where you kissed Malik during the announcement party. And it led to like a months of horror. And, your dad was just, he wanted you to marry this guy, but dare not kiss him in public. Right.
Or private.
Yeah. So, but that was fascinating to learn.
It is interesting. It's very interesting because I think my dad at that time was starting to have internal struggle where he wanted the best for me, what he thought would be for me to marry Malik. Malik was so charming, well-educated, traveled around the world, very, very rich. Everybody wanted Malik. So he wanted that. But at the same time, he started to feel that he was losing control.
Of his daughter.
Of his daughter.
And control of his daughter.
Yeah. So it's not just losing his daughter like you see it in movies, like, oh, the dad feels bad. No, he's losing control. Another man is getting the control. Yeah. So he did not handle that very well.
You talk about it being a transaction between owners from your father to Malik.
Yeah.
And where it seemed like where Malik was westernized to a certain degree with all his travels and seemed worldly, like you mentioned. But at the root, there was still the culture.
Think about it. Why would a man who is about to turn 30 have his mom go look for a bride for him who's 10 years younger? Like, I think he could have done that on his own.
Yeah. So, and then you guys did get married, right?
Yeah, we did.
And then you moved to the United States, which was bold.
Yeah.
So you moved to San Diego. You talked about this little Middle East area. Amazing stories there about, there's a story about when you guys are getting settled but you're going to get some new vehicles.
Yeah. It shows the marriage dynamic, right?
Yeah. Tell that story.
So we were new to the US and we wanted to go buy cars. So in his situation, he went and he got himself an amazingly beautiful, brand new red Audi.
Yeah.
Paid in cash, the whole thing. And then when he was ready to buy my car, he went and he got me, I can't remember the year. It was like a very, very, very old Oldsmobile that was breaking down all the time. But it just shows the dynamics. Yeah. I wanted a Honda, a small little Honda, but that was not accepted.
Yeah, there's an element of being suppressed was like lest you look more attractive or whatever in a nicer, newer car, But
it wasn't just the car; it was the dynamic of the relationship and everything.
Right.
So this was just one example, and at the end of the day, like, who cares what a person's car is? Now I don't care, but at that time, I was 20. Yeah. It mattered to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's funny.
Well, it was great. It was just so out of balance and so unfair.
Yeah.
I was in the Audi dealership yesterday afternoon.
Yeah.
And the story came to mind and I saw a red sports car. Not the same car, but, and I'm thinking about that. It's just like, it's a pretty hard slap in the face, right?
Yeah. And one time I went to the grocery store and as I parked, this older man came to me and he said, "Why are you driving an old person's car?" So, of course, he was making fun of the situation. He's a total stranger. But to me, it was a reconfirmation that I need a nicer car.
Yeah.
But again, another perspective could be, do I even deserve a nicer car? I wasn't working. I was depending financially on my husband. I don't know. Yeah.
Well, in that case, maybe you would both get the same kind of car. It would be lesser on his end and more on your end. Maybe that's...
Well, then we would be still married, maybe, if that was... Not just the car and a lot of other things, too.
There were so many other things going on. Yeah. That's just one example, but there were imbalances throughout the marriage, and there was limitations. You can only talk to your parents, for 20 minutes a week, and... very controlling.
Yeah.
So what appeared to be maybe this guy who was a little different, maybe a little more worldly and westernized,
was not.
He was as controlling as your father had been.
And that was a big disappointment for me because I was hoping for something different.
Yeah.
Something better.
Well, you had reason to believe that.
Yeah.
Right? You wrote beautifully, the expressions for the way that I was to live, meaning under his rules, your husband's rules, came in direct opposition with the way I wanted to live. I was not just battling to discover myself with the confines and expectations of the Middle Eastern community, but I was also struggling to exist in the larger American community, to which my Middle Eastern ties would not permit me to belong. I was stuck between two cultures, lost with no clear sense of self. So now you're in the United States and you're struggling with the marriage and you're struggling with the different cultures. So a lot going on there.
Yeah, it is. It is tough where even until now, I don't consider myself 100% American, even though I love being an American, and I will never be 100% Middle Eastern. And it's just something in between. It's not fitting in any culture. And it's tough. I think any immigrant may say something similar. But in that situation where there was the family dynamic too, and the marriage and all the expectations, it just made it so tough. I love that you read this because as you were reading, I'm like, wow, this is beautiful. Not to give myself compliment, at that time I had amazing writing coach, creative, who is also a creative writer. So she coached me through the whole thing. Amazing friends that read it over and over and helped me through it. So I just want to share like how grateful I am for everybody that was involved in this. I don't write like that, but it was edited and re-edited and re-edited, and many wonderful people that are creative helped with the process.
Which is the case with, I think, every book we read, right? I mean, that's the natural process. And it's interesting. I when I'm reading, and I read a lot, I don't mark in books. I don't put a pen or a highlighter in books. But your book, I have circled through. I'm going to give Allison the book to read after this, and I said, "Look, it's all filled with." Because there's so many beautiful passages. So, but so things, you're in the U.S. and Malik's trying to get his business going, jewelry business, right? And didn't go quite well, and he books back to Jordan at some point to get back in business while you're in the U.S. by yourself. And now he has some in-laws there, or he has some family there, and your in-laws. And then you're having to stay with them. Yeah. And it just seems so confining and challenging when you're like, this marriage thing is not working.
That was the beginning of the end. Yeah. Where it wasn't an option. I had to go and live with his mom and his dad. And it was horrible. Yeah. Because there was no privacy at all. So we got one room, which was supposed to be for like everybody get one room. And a lot of people were in that house. So his mom, his dad, his brother's wife, their kid, and his sister would come visit every day with her son and me and Malik when he's in the US, if he's not in Jordan, in 3-bedroom home. Yeah. It was a lot, no privacy. And my mother-in-law would go through my stuff, always try to listen in. It was just difficult time. And I think that resulted in what ended up happening afterwards.
I was surprised to read that when you decided that it was done, the marriage was over with, and you called your father. And there was initial support there. Like, wait a second. I did not see that coming at all. It didn't last long. Yeah. But I was kind of surprised with that. But then it turned south bad, right? Both from your father and from Malik, and I mean, you had it coming from every imaginable. And even the mother-in-law at one point was saying, she's going to control you now. Yeah. Right? I mean, so I just can't even imagine the stress that you were undergoing.
And we're talking about, at that time, I was 24. So when everything we're talking about right now, I was 24. I can't imagine a 24-year-old woman new to the U.S. dealing with all of that. So that's why I just couldn't take it. And I said, I'm leaving. In my dad's situation, he was supportive initially. But the sad part, it wasn't because of me. It was because he had plans of control.
So there's a lot of stories around that time in your life, and they're all very dramatic and very stressful. And can't imagine as a 24-year-old with everything that you're putting up with that. But at some point, you decided it was time for you to move on with your life. You wrote this. You left the in-laws. You moved out. You had to sneak out. Mm-hmm. They went somewhere, and you
Easter Sunday.
Yeah, and you snuck out and you left and got your own place. You said, I wanted to discover my place in the world. I needed to make a major shift in how I viewed my story. I needed to alter my self-perception and no longer think of myself as a young girl filled with fear and haunted by expectations. I needed to distinguish myself as a new woman, self-empowered, confident, and responsible for her own choices. So, I mean, with all this going on, you had the wherewithal to say, it's time to make a shift. Mm-hmm. And I think, you can look back at the support you had to encourage you to make those type steps, even though they laid kind of dormant there for a while. That was in you. But, I mean, that took bold action because you had a job, but you didn't have a big income. And now you're going to support yourself. And you describe your apartment early on. And, I mean...
No furniture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was sparsely decorated, shall we say. A lot of stories about that, and it trying to get you back. Your father giving you options, right? You either take him back or
I'll never talk to you again.
You're
At
dead
first
to
time,
me.
that I will disown you.
Yeah.
But then that escalated.
It escalated, and then it started to get dark for your mother, right? And then the stories about how she was going to, like she and your mother and your sister now had to get out.
Yeah. So they had to escape. My mom had to leave everything behind. She was 49 at that time. My sister was 17. And death threats. So I was dealing with death threats from my dad, but because he couldn't get to me, he decided that he was just going to kill them. And he would sleep every night with a knife under his bed. And my sister, who was 17, she would wake up in the morning thanking God that her dad didn't kill her in her sleep. How crazy is that? So we got to a point where my mom and sister, we planned the whole thing, which is surprising to me because we were raised to believe that we're worthless, we're not good enough, we're not smart enough, we should not have an identity. But my mom and I, we planned her escape. It did require for her to leave everything. So imagine, like, she left everything she built all of her life. She's now 71 and she's going to work for a long, long, long time because she had to start all over when she was 49. But they escaped. Yeah. And they moved to San Diego. So they lived with me. We were in a 1-bedroom apartment, no furniture. My manager eventually gave me a love seat that was filled with dog hair. But at least we had something to sit on.
Yeah. Your mother told the story that your father had planned to kill her, your sister, you. He was going to come to the U.S., kill you, and then kill himself. I mean, it was a plan.
Yeah.
So the fact that y'all all escaped that is a miracle.
It just makes me wonder, is it really culture or is it unaddressed mental illness? Because there's nobody in his right mind, or any person in their right mind would do something like this. So that's why I believe a lot of the things that we were dealing with, where we would mask it and say, oh, it's culturally, or men are supposed to be angry, or why are you making them angry? It's I don't think it's just that. I think there's a lot of hidden, unaddressed mental issues.
Yeah. For sure. Look, the book, as I said, is suspenseful, it's riveting, and so many dramatic stories like that throughout the book, and it's just a fantastic read. We would like to thank MBD Automation for their support of the Next Entrepreneur podcast. MBD Automation is a mechanical install contractor with a program-centric focus. So what do these guys do? They install conveyor systems, VRCs, platforms, singulators, sorters, and all sorts of other types of automated equipment. Who do they work for? They work for systems integrators, manufacturers, end users in fulfillment centers, airports, mail processing facilities, and projects in the defense industry. MBD Automation works for numerous Fortune 500 companies across the United States and has a list of international clients that they perform work for in the U.S. as well. If MBD Automation can help you on your next project, you can find them online at mbdautomation.com. This podcast is sponsored by Mayhall, Fondren Blaze, a Louisiana business litigation firm offering sophisticated legal advice that is tailored to meet the needs of their individual clients, including a wide variety of litigation, complex business negotiations, corporate formations, closings, and title examination. As leading entrepreneurs, your valuable time and resources should align with the expertise of MFB, a Louisiana practice made for business. Learn how we can work with you at www.mfbfirm.com. Could you or your business benefit from a comprehensive financial plan? Our sponsor, Centura Advisors, is a locally owned firm in Baton Rouge, Louisiana that specializes in personal and business financial planning, tax planning, corporate retirement plans, and investment management. We provide an all-in-one wealth management service so busy business owners like you can take back your valuable time. Visit www.centura-advisors.com to learn more. Centura Advisors, it's time to plan your future. This is a point in your life where you really start to come into your own. You get some wind in your sails. You start to work on your master's. You have your mother and sister with you, and a lot of interesting stories about those times and how you navigated through that. And then there came an opportunity to upgrade your job, and you took a job with IBM.
Yeah.
And it was really interesting when you talked about that 2-year rotational program that you did. Like only 8 MBA graduates in the country were selected for this. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so they have this annual program. It's a leadership development program. And at that time, they used to select just 8. It's 4 rotations. Each one is 6 months. And the rotations would mean move like a whole new department, new manager, new move, everything. And I started with them in Connecticut, then Raleigh, North Carolina. And then I stayed in North Carolina. And then I worked with them as an IBM consultant in Chicago and some other places. So it was amazing. This is mainly developing the future leaders of the company.
Yeah. And you talked about Japan.
Yeah. I got an international assignment to Japan. It was, I can't believe that they even sent me there. I loved it. So it was supposed to be 2 years, but then because of the recession in 2008, they had to bring the assignees back to the U.S. We cost a lot of money. Yeah.
You told some great stories about that, but there were some interesting cultural challenges there, which were, and you tell some really interesting stories about just the difference in the culture. So you had become fully Americanized, and you grew into that, and you loved who you became as an American woman and what you became in your life and in your career, and you were really celebrating that. But it's interesting when you went to Japan, that culture was different, and it. I don't know that it was so much women were to be submissive, but employees in general were to be submissive over their managers. Yeah. And that's not what you had come accustomed to in becoming the manager that you were, right? So yeah,
it's resulted in a lot of triggers for me, especially because of the way women were at that time being treated. It was tough. Of course, I loved it. I'm so grateful for it. Yeah. But it was tough going to work and observing certain things that would remind me of my background. Like, who would have thought that I would be able to see so many similarities between the Japanese and the Middle Eastern culture. Like, what are the chances? But there were so many, and it was obvious. And emotionally, it was too tough for me.
Yeah, that must have been a real challenge. Yeah. You told a story about climbing Mount Fuji.
Yeah.
I love that story. It's going to be this team building thing, right? All these people were going to go, and then it narrowed down to like 4 people.
Yeah. Well, it's a tough climb.
Right.
I didn't want to go either.
Your immediate boss was like, "Come on, let's do this," and then he bolted, right?
Yeah.
But you wrote a beautiful passage there when you were at the top and you went down to the crater there. Right. You said, you wrote, "I took a few minutes to reflect on my family. Who would have predicted, I wondered, when I was born and my grandfather wished that I would die because I was a girl. When my grandmother taught me about living with the perfect glass vase. When my husband warned me that I would not make it on my own and would beg like a dog to go back to him. And when my father threatened to make me minced meat. That I would achieve a life beyond my wildest dreams, beyond what I thought was possible or allowed for a woman with my background." Whew. That's a lot going on there. Mm. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
So, and that's what an achievement, climbing that mountain as well.
Yeah.
I'd love to do that.
Yeah. Well, the fun part is afterwards going to their hot springs, because it's a volcanic mountain, so there's a lot of hot springs around it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm glad that we survived. We didn't die.
Yeah, but it seemed like it was a little dicey there for a minute when y'all get to the lodge and y'all were starving and it was closed and you had to eat protein bars and stuff like that. So some point you make it back from Japan, you're back in the U.S., and at some point, did I read this right? Did your father reach out to you?
Yeah. So I think it was 2012. Yeah. This is gonna sound so funny. He sent me a friend request on Facebook. Like, isn't that so shocking? What world are we living in? This man is threatening to kill me and make me minced meat. And then he sends me a friend request on Facebook. It's such a funny world we are living in. Yeah. So I didn't accept his friend request, obviously, but I did send him a message. Initially, wishing him the best and saying good things. Yeah. And he did send a lot of nice messages, but he was talking about things that really were not the core of the issue that I was dealing with. Right. I was dealing with a lot of heartbreak and pain, and it doesn't go away. It stays. Right. And he wanted to send me messages on Facebook about his rose garden and the guests that they came to visit, and that he likes to swim, which is, I think it's nice. Maybe in his way, he's trying to find a connection and to talk about it. But I wanted to talk about, and I told him, I said, I'm more than happy to talk about the flower garden, but I believe we have more deeper topics we need to talk about. And I asked him to apologize. That didn't go well. I stopped hearing from him. A
comprehensive apology of
everything.
All the bad things that happened.
Yeah. So my dad ghosted me. He stopped sending messages. Well, he was not ready, obviously, to apologize. Most likely, he still, at that time and even now, still thinks that he didn't do anything wrong. Culturally, everything he was doing was is very acceptable. Yeah. So he didn't do anything wrong, and what would he apologize for?
You're right. So, it's interesting that you work for IBM, just one of the world's great companies, and I think 300,000 employees or something to that effect, and traveled in the way that you did, but you ended up in Baton Rouge.
Yeah.
Right. And so you did a TED Talk.
Yeah.
A TEDx Talk in Baton Rouge. Tell us about that.
So when I first moved to Baton Rouge, and I moved with IBM, as they were starting the technology center in downtown.
Right.
And the BRAC, the Baton Rouge area chamber, area. They were so amazing. Like they took such a great job, like did a great job with the management team as we moved. And one of the things they told us is that they have a TEDx in an LSU. And I remember writing a note saying, I have to attend the TEDx. And I was talking to one of their employees months later, and she said that she was volunteering to help with the event. And I said, I want to be a volunteer too. I want to help. So she said, okay, I'll connect you with the person who organizes the volunteers. So of course we met over drinks to discuss that. And as we were sitting there, so the BRAC employee, the TEDx LSU person and me, I was just getting so many messages in my head that were saying, don't ask to be a volunteer, ask to be a speaker. And I don't know where that came from. Oh my goodness. So I stopped talking about being a volunteer and I kept talking about being a speaker. And she was so shocked because that was not the purpose of the meeting. And she said, well, you want to be a speaker? I'll connect you with the right person. So a few months later, I got an email from TEDx LSU and the person was asking to have a meeting with me. So we had a phone call and at the end he said, you want to be a speaker? You'll be a TEDx speaker. So we started working on the topic. And initially, I wanted to talk about working globally, of course, right. Like how to be a global leader. And I wrote this wonderful talk and got it approved by him. And then something in my heart just kept saying, no, this is not it. So then I started working on another talk about body language, which is so much fun, like body language across cultures and things that we do. And it was so funny. And still my heart did not feel that this is the right one. And then I wrote another talk about the transformation that the leader has to go to adapt to teams and to cultures and different personalities. So as I was working on that, I just needed a good story. And one of my friends, who's absolutely amazing, she told me, well, talk a little about your transformation. So we were working on that. And then she told me, well, maybe you need to talk about the vase. And I said, no, I can't. I'm new to the city. I don't know anybody other than from a business, like connections. I'm not talking about it. So then she kept nagging and nagging and nagging. We started working on it. It was supposed to be just the beginning of the talk. And it got bigger and bigger and bigger. And then it became the entire talk.
And with a dramatic ending.
With very dramatic ending, shattering the hell out of that vase.
You just dropped it. The mic drop, the vase drop.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Okay, so tell us what you are doing now. You in your business now. Tell us what got you to the point to say, I'm going to leave this corporate America and I'm going to start my own gig, and how it's going.
So after the TEDx, I was so surprised in a good way how many people connected with the message from all around the world. I've had men from India send me messages telling me how they were crying as they were watching the talk. I've had grandparents and grandmothers and parents and so many people. A lot of organizations started wanting me to talk to their employees, and I would take time off and do it, but a lot of them ended up being IBM competitors, so it just did not work so well. But I was so scared of leaving my job. I had amazing salary, benefits, I was comfortable, I was traveling the world with them. It wouldn't make any sense. But then my manager, who's the general manager for the centers, I used to absolutely respect him and love him. He retired. And they brought another manager who was not too nice. Let's just say it that way. And I just could not work for her anymore. It was very, very tough. And I think it was a divine intervention. It was something more powerful than me that wanted me to get out of my comfort zone. And I just gave my resignation and gave myself a month, not knowing what am I going to be doing. I knew I wanted to use the story to inspire others, but I didn't know what to do. So I went to San Diego to visit my mom for a couple of weeks. I went to a writers conference, then I went to a speakers conference, then I came back to Baton Rouge, and I'm like, what do I do now? I have no job. I'm not on vacation. What do I do? So I started putting a list. I need to have a website. I need marketing. I need to figure out what my products are, all of these things. And it became so overwhelming that I closed the computer and watched 3 movies in one day. But then I started little by little. I hired a lot of branding coaches. I hired a local company that worked on my website. I ended up hiring a lot of people to help me get things more clear. And the first 2 years, I barely made any money. So I was depending on a lot on my savings. But then it's amazing how it started growing and more people started connecting with the message. So I've had companies ask me to coach their CEO and then reach out to me and to do leadership and employee engagement work, or to help them engage the millennials and Gen Zers. And that was not part of the plan. And of course, with all the unrest in our world related to like what the focus on diversity and inclusion, a lot of that became part of the demand. So I learned to follow the needs of my clients. Wow. And what they need is to create healthy cultures, inclusion, to retain their employees. And I have the experience for that. I've done it with IBM around the world. I was an employee, so I know what employees need. I was a manager and senior in leadership. I know what leaders want. Now, as a consultant, I know I can help my clients with understanding the different needs, to connect the employees with leadership and to create the best culture.
Wow, that's fantastic.
And help them give voice to people that are excluded. I've been excluded as a woman in the Middle East. I don't want people to face that. So I take all of these, the knowledge and the feelings, and bring it to culture where we're giving a voice to people that feel misfit and get the most out of them to support the organization.
I can see where that'd be so powerful to have you give that message. Mm. Well, Dima, it has just been, the greatest pleasure to learn about your story and to read your book and to learn so much about cultures and the different way that people are raised. And but I think the greatest thing is the inspiration that your book brings to, like, I was going to say to women, but you've just clarified that it goes well beyond that. And I think it's an important lesson. I mean, the book is written so well to teach, and it's an important life lesson. So congratulations on just nailing that. So your career now, it seems like you're busy.
Yeah.
How do you see your business growing?
It is to continue to focus on what I'm doing. A big part of my business is to turn Breaking Vases into a movie, and this is how we got connected. It is, we're working on the screenplay. It turned out to be so much more work than I expected.
Yeah.
Yeah. Initially, I was told, just work on 1 page a day, and in 100 days, you'll be done. Well, it's been over 100 days. But yeah, to turn it into a movie and to reach wider audience.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So, and that is, where is that happening? Is that a local?
Yeah, we're working. Oh, of course. I'm in Louisiana with the film industry here. It's just so perfect.
Yeah.
So my assistant and I were working on the screenplay, and it's going to take longer than I thought. But my goal is to have it done here locally.
So with your business, the way that it is, that it's your story, you're the inspiration, you have the experience as you go out and make keynote addresses and do your training. Can that grow beyond you?
Yeah, it does. It will. Right now, when my clients are having a contract with me, they're hiring me. They want Dima.
Right.
So eventually a big part of the business is going to have coaches or speakers under my brand, where I train them. They deliver my workshops. Not there yet, but I think eventually it's going to be like that because I want to have a life too. So I've been working so hard all my life between what I had to deal with in the Middle East, seeking my education, all the corporate jobs, which totally like took over my life, starting a business. So I want to be able to make money in my sleep and empower others to spread the message.
Yeah. So, do you have a vase collection?
So well, you could ask me how many did I break, but those vases are made in Hollywood, and even though I refer to them as a glass vase, they're not made of glass. They're made of special material. So when you watch a movie and you see, for example, Tom Cruise jumping from a window and there's shards everywhere, it's the same material. He's really not jumping from a glass window. It's this kind of plastic that he's jumping. Or if you see people fighting in a movie and they take a beer bottle and they smash it on somebody's head, it's the same material. Yeah. So I don't have a vase collection, and I'm always worried of people. They tell me all the time, even today, one of the attendees told me, she said, I can't wait to go to whatever and buy a vase and I'm going to smash it. And I'm like, don't do that. Like, don't go hurt yourself. Those are specially made vases.
So you've gone through so many vases because as you're doing your talks, you've dropped vases multiple times.
So I break a vase and then I bring people from the audience afterwards to share their experiences of what they're ready to shatter and to shatter their vase. Oh. So a lot of my keynotes, we have at least 3 to 4 vases that get broken.
Oh, that's so cool.
And that's the powerful part because it's not, my attendees love it when they see me break it. After I share my story, because it's just like they're waiting for this moment with all the suspense. But it's so much more meaningful when they see somebody from the attendees get on the stage, share their experience, and one of them break their vases too.
Dima, it has been such a pleasure to talk to you, to someone as accomplished and worldly and that has overcome as much as you have and made the best out of life, a beautiful life. And it's just fascinating. It is absolutely fascinating.
Thank you.
So congratulations and thank you for sharing with us.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me here.
Yes, ma'am. This episode was special for me. I really appreciate Dima coming in and telling her personal story of her journey. There was so much to learn from her book. It was really a gift. Learning about different cultures, learning about oppression and overcoming, challenges and then triumph. And to see that Dima grew professionally in the way that she did, ultimately working on the global scale, was really just an amazing transformation. Making it back to Baton Rouge and then telling her story and inspiring others in the way that she has and creating a business in which she's thriving. So I really appreciate Dima. I appreciate you guys watching, and we'll catch you next time. We would like to thank our title sponsor, B1 Bank. They can be found online at b1bank.com. The Next Entrepreneur is produced by Propel Productions. You can find more information at propelyourstory.com. Don't forget to subscribe to the Next Entrepreneur podcast and hit the bell for notifications. You can also follow us on social media. The links are in the description below.